Avery, whose show is this? And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Senior Lakers Insider for Clutch Points. And today on the show, we have actually a few things that we have to get to. So, first and foremost, Friday afternoon, Pete and I recorded an episode of The Hook in which we drafted all-time rotations using just Lakers players. And some of you guys had a lot to say about some of the results there of that draft. So I'm going to talk about that. That is actually going to naturally lead into one of the central messages I want to be very prevalent throughout this show, which is that the Lakers basically have to try to find a way to balance fit and talent on this when they're building out this roster. Just like any team, when you're building out any kind of roster, even baseball, you have to consider fit, right? So, like that Yankees team that the Dodgers beat in the World Series last year, they were this kind of big and hulking, power hitting team that was very good for the vast majority of the season. But then when the smaller aspects of baseball of the game started mattering more, you started to see some of the seams on that roster as it got pulled a little bit. And you had that fateful fifth inning in game 5, I think it was, where they just completely farted around and forgot how to make an out. And, they were completely undressed on the base paths by the Dodgers and all that stuff. And so like the Lakers, as they, and again, this is the case for every team that always is making, roster decisions, is how do you factor in overall talent, which obviously really matters, but also fit and how those pieces kind of work together. So we're going to talk about that over the course of the show. And then as always, because it is a Sunday, it's a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, my time. I'm going to answer your questions. We have a couple from the iTunes mailbag. I asked for some from Twitter, so I'll get some from Twitter as well. And then if there are any questions that come in via the live comments from this show, then I will get to some of those as well. So, yeah, packed show for a random Sunday when we're still waiting for the NBA season to end. But let's get to all of it. A quick reminder, please do hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you guys are watching right now. If you guys are on Twitter, where you can follow me at Anthony Irwin LA, you can find me there. But if you're on Twitter, head on over to youtube.com/@Lakers Lounge to find the show there. If you guys are on YouTube already, hit that like button, hit that share button. That stuff really helps. And hit that subscribe button as well. And then if you guys are listening to this via podcast, obviously hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get pods, preferably on Odyssey, because I am a company man. As far as the shows to check out, that episode that I recorded with Pete, I thought I hopped off the recording. Jen, I believe, was already home from work, and I told her that one felt good off the fingertips. So if you haven't checked it out already, I hope you guys do. It was a fantastic conversation. One, it's just fun to break up the monotony of just strictly talking about, well, what do we do here? What kind of backup point guard do the Lakers need? Like it's just, we've had so many of the same version, like different versions of the same conversation, that I got kind of sick of it. We found this really kind of unique to tackle some of those things. And I thought that the episode went well. And then the draft itself was a lot of fun, even though, as we'll talk about here in a second, even though some of you guys were pretty pissed at how that draft turned out. So let's go ahead and dive into that. So I went ahead and I kept tabs on the final rosters here. So Pete's final roster, he has Magic at point guard. He has Eddie Jones at the shooting guard. You have LeBron at small forward, and then Pau and Shaq starting for him. Then coming off of the bench, he has Alex Caruso, Jerry West, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Robert Ory, and James Worthy. And then for me, he has a star-studded group, but I think some of the egos there aren't going to handle, like, that team is not together for the long haul, is what I would say. Some of those guys would get pretty sick of their smaller parts in that rotation. But for me, I have Luka, Kobe, Trevor Ariza, Anthony Davis, and Wilt Chamberlain as my starters. I have Lamar Odom, Derek Fisher, Michael Cooper, Elgin Baylor, and Meta World Peace rounding out my bench. I have a few more role players there who I think would be a little bit more open to some of the roles that they would have to fill on that team. And, it makes it look a little bit less impressive when you're at a first glance. But I don't know. I joked with Pete. We were texting afterwards. I told him I was so angry still that he took Caruso when he did. I literally was thinking, should I take Ariza or Caruso? And I really should have taken Caruso. But I was texting. He was like, I just want to be in the room when you have to tell Magic Johnson or Jerry West or Kareem that they have to come off of the bench. I just want to be there for whenever that happens and, videotape it. But, it's a lot of people were really, really angry at the fact that it took forever for Magic to get drafted. It took forever for Kareem to get drafted. It took forever for Worthy to get drafted. The thing is, the Lakers, we have been thoroughly spoiled as Lakers fans, right? We have rooted for, like, look throughout all of these generations, and the chances are of the top 5 players in, each era, at least one of them, sometimes multiple guys, played for the Lakers from era to era to era to era, right? And you go back to the 60s and 70s. Okay, you had Jerry West, you had Wilt Chamberlain, you had Elgin Baylor. Yeah, the 80s and 90s, you had Magic and Kareem and James Worthy. You go into the late 90s and early 2000s, you have Shaq and Kobe, and then eventually you in the next generation to come, right? You had Kobe and Powell, and then now you have LeBron, and now you even have Luka, who is going to be one of the best players of his generation as well. We have been so thoroughly blessed when it comes to the stars who have donned the Lakers foreign blue and gold that, these exercises are impossible to screw up. They're also impossible to make everybody happy. We probably could have used another, somebody else drafting so that, you would have like a LeBron team, you would have a Kobe team, and you would have a Magic team. Because the problem is, and this is where we talk about the notion of fit versus talent. If you want to say that, like, Kareem was a better player at his peak than Powell, absolutely, totally agree. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, for my money, I think he has a far more credible claim for best player ever than he is often given credit for. But the problem is, if you're talking about peaks while wearing a Lakers uniform, Shaq's peak was higher. And then if you're talking about, like, if you want to make the case that maybe I should have taken Kareem instead of Wilt, okay, I can kind of see it. But for me, the reason I took Wilt was because I needed a rim protector, rebounder, rim runner. And Wilt, when he wore a Lakers uniform, was, I think, a little bit, especially if you modernize his game a little bit and you make him somehow even more athletic, in the few decades between when he played and the advancements that we have seen in technology since, and training since, and nutrition and diet since, I think you would probably see a Wilt that would be pretty staggering. And I made the choice to go with Wilt. I could have gone with Kareem. That's fine. And then the problem there, though, is that, like, all right, so if you already have Shaq and you already have Wilt drafted to the two teams, Kareem wasn't a 4. So what are you going to have him playing power forward next to Shaq and have no floor spacing or floor balance at all. You're going to have him playing next to Wilt and not have any floor balance at all. So, yeah, like if we have a third person drafting, if say Harrison joined us for this exercise and he was able to get if he was getting a Wilt and Pete was getting a Shaq, I would happily take Kareem. But as there were only two teams being drafted, you do and the point of the exercise was to find a modern rotation or a rotation that would dominate the modern sport, the modern iteration of the sport. Then it's kind of tricky to do all of that and get to all of the names that you're talking about. And again, that's not even taking into account the ego involved, with some of these guys where I don't think Kareem would have been all that thrilled about coming off of the bench, uh, behind Shaq. I don't think Magic would have been all that thrilled about coming off the bench behind West or vice versa. I don't think James Worthy would have been thrilled coming off of the bench for Eddie Jones, right? Or maybe even LeBron. I think you would kind of understand LeBron, but you get my point. And then for me, like Elgin Baylor is coming off of the bench behind Trevor Ariza. That would be kind of tricky. That would be a tough conversation to have. And maybe eventually I would probably just kind of do the locker room thing. Elgin Baylor starts, Trevor comes off of the bench, and then you just have wing after wing after wing after wing after wing coming off of the bench on my team. I don't have that problem as bad, I think, as Pete does with his team. But it is still a thing that you have to weigh into this stuff. And that's something that the Lakers are going to have to weigh in with the way that they build out this roster this year, where maybe it does make more sense for Austin to come off of the bench, so that you have a little bit more balance, a little bit more defense out there, depending on who the other guard that the Lakers they go out and get. Because like this notion of, and I think Rick Carlisle said after the game, or maybe it was Dagno, one of the coaches who advanced in these playoffs, said you need to have multiple ball handlers out there. I totally agree. You have Luka and you have LeBron. Those guys are pretty good. Do you need a third elite ball handler there if it means not being athletic enough to defend at a high enough level consistently? That is a conversation that the Lakers are having internally. And that's a conversation we've been having on the show basically since the season ended. But the reason I wanted to clarify on this, it's not that I would never intentionally besmirch the basketball players that were Kareem, Magic, Worthy, the Showtime Lakers. We do not arrive at the kind of basketball that is being played right now without the Showtime Lakers. They were a necessary step in the evolution of the sport to eventually arrive where we are now. So it's just purely a matter of fit and ego. And, I liken, I tweeted this out yesterday or today, but I tweeted out, making a basketball team especially is like putting together a jazz band. You need to have a pianist. You need a bassist. You need vocals. You need a drummer. And then you also have to take into account how all of these people are going to interact on and off the stage. If you want a sustainable jazz band, it's going to stick together for the long haul. Right? You need a guitarist. You need all of these things to make that work. And they need to mesh together. And those puzzle pieces need to fit so that by the time that band gets out there together, you get that beautiful music and they can just look at each other and know where the other person is going to go within a song. Right? It's this chemistry, that we're talking about here. It's like putting together a plate at at a fine dining restaurant and understanding, all right, I have this representing the sweetness, this represents the earthiness, here's the salt, here's the fire, here's the heat, here's the texture, here's this, and when you put it all together, it's got to work. You need to be able to, with one forkful. The best meals is when you go with your fork. The best bites you get a representation of every piece that is on that plate together, and you get to see what that finally has and where that's at. And if one thing doesn't quite stick out, it might still be a good meal, but it's not great. And it's tricky. It's putting together these basketball rosters is exactly like that. Where and shit, look at the Golden State Warriors. I was out doing the lawn today, and I was thinking about, because I was listening to Pete and I was listening to Darius, and they were talking about how uh the the first team that fully weaponized small ball, how Draymond Green was such a vital part in that, right? And they were talking about that. It was a really good conversation. But it made me think, I was like, Jesus, it would hurt to be a Warriors fan knowing what you had potentially the heights that team reached when it had KD. But because those pieces, while they fit perfectly on the court as just basketball players in 2K, it didn't work off of the court. It didn't work for the remaining 47 or 23 hours or whatever, however many hours in the day that you don't spend playing basketball. It just didn't quite work that way. And as a result of that team should have won 7 championships. If you had built that roster in the previous CBA, which doesn't hamstring teams and dynasties the way that this current CBA does, and you had that team in 2K, you had that team together for 8 years, you would win 6 or 7 championships. That's how great that team was. But because those guys eventually wound up hating each other, specifically KD and Draymond, it didn't have that sustainability that we're trying to strive for here. And that's all part of the meal. That's the texture, right? So anyway, that's a really long way of ranting and raving and meandering around. But yeah, to those who were offended by how long it took for Magic and for Kareem and for Worthy and even Baylor, who I kept calling George Gervin for some stupid reason. But like, to those of you who were offended that it took so long for those guys to come off of the board, you're right. In a vacuum, you're absolutely right. The problem is Rob Pelinka keeps on thinking about all of his moves in a vacuum and never combines the vacuum sealed bags that you put into the sous vide. That's the problem. That's why the Lakers keep on throwing dartboards at different darts at different dartboards. Even one year, it's like, we need all the shooting, and you ignore the athleticism. Another year, you need all the creativity, but you ignore the shooting. Another year, it's whatever other factor that the previous year was lacking, but you ignore the other 2 factors that also matter in building a viable roster. That's how you arrive at a postseason last year with only Jackson Hayes as your starting center, playable, even kind of playable center, is because you could look at a lot of the moves that Rob has made, and you could say, in a vacuum, I kind of get Kendrick Nunn. I kind of get this move. I kind of get this move. But then when you look at those moves together in any given season, you're like, 7 combo guards, Rob? Really? When a coach feels the need to play Austin Reeves at center, that indicates that the GM had no idea what he was doing when he was putting that roster together. No idea. and that's where the Lakers found themselves at one point. And it's the same guy responsible for putting this roster together. So we'll see how well he's able to do that. But the point of the exercise when Pete and I did it was to show how important fit and talent is supposed to be weighed. He kind of cheated, and he went he went with Kareem and Magic coming off the bench, and you know what, Pete? I hope Pete one day gets to talk to Kareem and tell him, "Yeah, I have you coming off of my bench on my 10-man Lakers rotation," and just see how that goes. The look on Kareem's face. I have time for a quick. Somebody asked me a while back what happened to story time, and we were talking about this Showtime Lakers team. So I'll do a little bit of story time. I need a sounder for story time, but this was way back earlier in my career, and the Spectrum used to have what they used to call blogger nights, and they would welcome Lakers Nation and Silver Screen and Roll and Locked On Lakers and trying to think. I think that was it. As far as local blogs and smaller kind of platforms, and not even smaller because Lakers Nation and Silver Screen, we actually trafficked a lot more than like the Times. But anyway, they used to throw these blogger nights, and they would bring us in, they would give us dinner, and we would be allowed to interview Spectrum's on-air talent. So, and they would do it kind of like a car wash where you would sit there, and then, while I'd be interviewing James Worthy, somebody else would be interviewing like Derek Fisher. And then, one of the nights that I did it right, I was able to interview Ali, and then Candace, and so on and so forth. They were really like, Geeter was loved doing those things. I haven't talked to Geeter in too long. Hope he's okay. But Bresnahan used to love doing it too. Brez is like legitimately one of the nicest people on planet Earth. But so this is the first year that we're doing it. And the person who kind of put it together, the PR person who put it together, she is clearly prepping Spectrum's on-air talent for what is about to happen. And at that time, there were only a couple podcasts. So everybody else was doing interviews that was eventually going to make their way into pieces that people were writing up about what Spectrum was trying to do there. And I think I might have actually been the only podcast, now that I think about it, who brought a mic and brought my equipment to be able to talk to their talent. And the first person I was going to talk to is James Worthy. So the PR person is talking to James Worthy. He's standing in the doorway, just finished getting his makeup done for TV. And the thing about Spectrum, I don't know if it's still the case, but Spectrum had cement floors, and they had these huge cavernous ceilings and these hallways that just echoed and James Worthy, obviously, if you've ever heard him talk, which you have, he has this big booming voice, right? And so he's at the far end of the of this corridor, and I'm walking in, and I have my backpack, and I have my mic, and I'm they're telling me where I'm going to set up, and it's this little office room off to the side. So I'm getting ready to go in there, and James sees me carrying all of my stuff, and he yells down from the other end of the hallway there. He goes, "Hey, you podcast!" And I'm like, I think he thinks my name is Podcast. So I just kind of like wave, "Hi, James, you're one of my heroes," and I just kind of duck into this room, and I get set up. And I'm finishing setting up there. I think Harrison was going to interview me with James, but I get set up. James steps into the room, and I go, "Hi, James, how's it going?" He goes, "I know who you are. Podcast. Nice to meet you." And I'm like, "Yep, yeah. He definitely thinks my name is Podcast." So we hold this interview, and I started by saying, like, "Hey, everybody, I'm Anthony. This is James Bleeping Worthy, and we have this really fun discussion. It's one of the absolute great, tier one moments of my early career, maybe my life to this point. It was awesome. He was really, really fun to talk to." So we finished the interview, and he goes, we got, it was the way they used to do it was pretty cool, where we would we all of us bloggers would go into the separate room. We would eat. We would all watch the game together. And then at like the fourth quarter, they would let us come into the big meeting room, production room, where all of the talent was watching the game together. And they would set there were some chairs kind of dispersed around here. And one year it was really cool. I got to sit between Anton Jameson and Karan Butler. Both of those guys were just talking my ear off the whole time. Just really, really fun stuff. And so that night ends. The following year, we go back. Same deal. PR person goes and talks to all of the talent, tells them what's going to happen and how this is all going to work. This time there are multiple. At this point, I think Lakers Nation had launched their pod. So I was in one room with my mic, and then Lakers Nation was in their room with their mic. And I think that was it as far as podcasts go. But still, James pokes his head out from makeup room, sees me again. He goes, "Hey, you podcast." And I'm like, still, all right, awesome. I guess I'm just Forever Podcast now. I'll just legally change my name to Podcast, and that way James Worthy knows my name. Oh. So James ducks into the room again, and he goes, "Podcast, my man, how you holding up, bud?" And I'm like, I feel stupid correcting you here, but my name's actually Anthony. He goes, "Oh, dude, fuck yeah, I know that. I'm just busting your balls. How's your family, Anthony?" And I'm like, mind is blown, because one, James Worthy knows my name. That was ridiculous. That was really cool. And then two, this guy had pranked me for 2 years, making me think I thought that he thought my name was Podcast. All right, that's story time. All right, let's go ahead and dive on into some of your questions here. We will start with Mana from Heaven, who writes, "How much of peak LeBron do we realistically have left? Maybe 50%. If we ignore cap implications, would the Lakers actually be better off without him at this point, purely from a basketball perspective? What realistic trade opportunities did the Lakers miss out on because they were not fully committed to the LeBron AD era? Was someone like Miles Turner ever truly on the table? And what other deals could have meaningfully changed the team's direction?" All right, so I'll start with one. I don't think there is a world where the Lakers are better off without LeBron. We can't ignore cap implications. The Lakers don't have any other way to spend dollar for dollar the money that would open up if LeBron just decided to retire right now. Two, he was just named to an All-NBA team. Second team All-NBA. That means, by definition, he is considered a top 10 player in the NBA. In what world is any team better by not having a top 10 player on their team? So that's number one. I honestly, I don't need to go any further than that. Two, what realistic trade opportunities did the Lakers miss out on because they were not fully committed to the LeBron AD era? I can't get specifically into names, though. Obviously, Miles Turner, the Lakers at various points could have had Miles Turner. I'll say that. But what I will say, though, is that the Mark Williams trade should indicate to everybody that if Rob wanted to, he had the pieces, he had the assets, he could have at any point over the previous couple of years before they traded for Luka Doncic, they could have gone out and gotten the center that Anthony Davis wanted to play with and wanted to play a few more minutes so that AD could, the game wouldn't go to shit anytime AD sat. So we saw what that package was. That package was fairly replicable at various points over the previous few years leading up to the Lakers getting Luka. But yeah, I think that should indicate, given how quickly Rob operated there, That should tell everybody what you need to know. That if the Lakers felt so inclined, they could have gone out and gotten the center upgrade that they wanted to. And by the way, prices were lower a few seasons ago. Now prices on centers have actually risen because everybody is starting to realize if you have somebody who can limit the other team's offensive rebounds and create offensive rebounds and extra possessions for you, that is super duper valuable. And now those players are more expensive to acquire, whether it's in free agency or via the draft. So the fact that the Lakers basically entered multiple seasons with this, you know, poo-poo platter of shitty veteran minimum contracts that they were hoping would just be slightly better than a veteran minimum, that was a choice that Rob made over and over and over again. And it bit the Lakers this year, where you do go out and Luka does land in your lap, but because you basically have to scramble for Mark Williams, they didn't have a viable center rotation heading into the postseason, and they lost in the first round as a result of it. So Rob has to wear that, and the context of how they got Mark Williams should tell you a lot of what the Lakers basically decided not to do while they were waiting for LeBron and AD to exit stage left, however that would be. Next question here from Kush Corleone is a funny one. Would you take Russ back on the Lakers at the minimum? What if he just replaced Shake Milton? No. I'm on record. I don't think a team that relies at all heavily on Russell Westbrook can win a championship. He's just too unpredictable. We've seen he was on a veteran minimum with the Clippers. He was on the veteran minimum with the Nuggets. And the Nuggets, when Russ was playing well, they looked really bleeping good. But then when Russ, kind of fell back to the mean, regressed to the mean as a shooter, and he stopped knocking down open shots, you saw what that looked like. And he made some defensive mistakes. He had some brain farts that could have also really hurt the Nuggets. I'm good. I'm good on Russ. He's good on the Lakers too. Like he doesn't ever want to be a Laker again. I think I'm pretty positive he probably hates the Lakers fan base. I don't think that is ever happening again, and I'm fine that it won't. I think there are plenty of other guys that you could get. Maybe that they won't have the same highs that a Russell Westbrook can provide you, but they also won't have the lows. And when you're building out a roster, you want your veteran minimum guys, that maybe they can occasionally win you the game, a game here and there, but far more often they're going to lose you games. And with Russ, given the floor of what he is capable of and how big that gap is between floor, I would argue that the gap between the floor and the ceiling of what Russ is capable of that's a bigger gap than any other great player in the history of the NBA and maybe of any sport in general. And I just don't think that's something that you can comfortably rely on in the postseason. All right, let's go to here we go. Go to Twitter here, where somebody has a screen grab of being subscribed to the show. So I appreciate that. Let's see, at Laker Goat 17 writes, do you remember what reaction was like when the Lakers rebranded their uniforms in 1999 and 2000? I'm curious because I firmly believe it is time for a jersey revamp with the new Luka era incoming. Thoughts? Thanks. That's a great question. I remember people didn't love the new Lakers uniforms. I didn't love them very much. I just thought that they had beautiful uniforms in the actual gold with the rounded collars and the thinner shoulder strap, and I just thought that was what a Lakers uniform should look like. Then they brought in you had the V-neck that I didn't love. The newer uniforms were super bulky, like, used to be the shoulder strap on the old uniforms was about yay wide, right? It was probably about halfway, I would say, between the neck and the end of the shoulder blade. And the new, like in 1999 when they brought in the new ones, they covered the whole shoulder and they made them almost look like vests, like sweater vests. I didn't love the look all that much. Now, what that did usher in, I believe, was the Sunday whites. I don't believe there were Sunday whites of the old uniforms. So that was a nice addition to the like I'm not completely anti-change when it comes to uniforms or Lakers branding or anything like that. If it's a cool look, it's a cool look. Um but I do think, like with the current version of these uniforms, I don't like that it's a banana yellow on the jerseys, and I just gold. It's a purple and gold is a thing, it's something that the Lakers have always valued. I think that should be something that they should roll with. And then as far as like revamping the uniforms, if they revamp them, because one look that I think will never outright fail is when you add kind of a modern tweak to a retro look. And I think if the Lakers were to basically find a way to return to an actual gold uniform, and if they were to find a way like that black stripe down the side, that's got to go. There's no point for that. Black. I understand the Mamba black uniforms. Okay, all right, I get it. I guess. But I do think that all of these jerseys, swapping them out as frequently as the league does, and these teams not having consistent color schemes, and sometimes color schemes on the uniforms don't match what the court looks like. Uh, I just think that there's some brand cheapening there that the league needs to be a lot more aware of. So I like the thought that we are entering a new era, and maybe it's time for Luca to have more of an imprint on what the Lakers look like when he's out there. But if they do anything, I think their priority has to be scrap what you did from 1999 to 2000, scrap what you did with the current iteration of these jerseys, keep the Sunday whites. I think a retro look at the Sunday white would be a clean ass uniform. Especially with, by the way, so many athletes nowadays are wearing shorter shorts, and I think that would make the retro uniforms look even cooler. So yeah, I think there are ways to dial it back a little bit, revamp it, add a modern tweak, but not to the extent that we've seen so far with this current grouping of uniforms. Let's see. Okay. At Bashir_1 asks, I'm sure you've heard the reports coming out of the Pelicans. Anyone you'd trade Austin for on that roster? I would probably say Trey Murphy tops that list. Uh, Again, that's where, because if somebody was to sit me down and be like, look, Austin is just better. He produces more than Trey Murphy does. I would listen, but I think it's relatively close, and I think Murphy's skill set fits a lot better alongside Luka for the long haul than Austin's will. So I would go there. I am not touching Zion with a 10-foot pole. Uh, Obviously, by this point, I'm sure you guys have seen the allegations against him. I'm good. I was good before. I'm especially good now. Let that guy. I don't even know what his future looks like in the NBA. He's so talented when he's healthy that some team would probably take a chance on him. But no, thank you. Absolutely not. So outside of that, yeah, I think Murphy is probably the only guy. I know a lot of people like Herb Jones or the idea of trading Austin for Herb Jones. That's where you're going too far in the fit direction and ignoring talent a little bit too much for my liking. If they would listen to a Rui and Herb Jones swap, okay, I would that would at least get the conversation going for me. But yeah, I'm really curious what happens with the Pelicans because I didn't think that was a bad roster last year. They just had the injury year from hell. And now it seems like they're getting ready to just completely tear it down, which is why they hired a new GM. But I didn't think David Griffin did a really poor job building out that roster. You got unlucky with a lot of those injuries. And, now look, a lot of the stuff gets dictated by luck, and that's worth noting always. But I don't know. I didn't think to myself, man, that roster sucks at the beginning of the year. I thought that was a clear playoff contender last year coming into the year. They could never get healthy, and it's a bummer. But if the Lakers can stand to benefit from an overreaction to how New Orleans season went last year, works for me. Let's go to some of the live comments here, starting with some of the super comments. So I get to play this bad boy. All right. J1 writes, any teams looking to trade their 25 first for a 31st, for the 31 first? I would probably say you could probably find a deal like that before you traded for Luka, because the future with Luka is going to be quite a bit brighter than it was with an aging LeBron and an aging Anthony Davis. So I think that kind of tempers down the market there a bit. If you do that, I would hope that you also get like a second rounder there as well, because otherwise you're just kind of splitting up. You're just unless there's somebody you really really like in the draft that you want to get involved with, and I so this is what's funny, and I've reported this before. Dan Wojcicki and I talked about this as well, but the Lakers were getting ready the year last year when they drafted Dalton Connect. They were ready to draft a center. And Misi was right there. They could have taken Misi, but Dalton fell to them, and they jumped at that opportunity. Again, talent and fit being a consistent theme here throughout this episode. Fit would dictate you take Misi there. Talent, and a lot of people just basically say, take the best player available. Talent dictated that you take Connect there. And now, look, maybe Misi wouldn't have been as good with the Lakers last year. They also like Tristan da Silva, who wasn't very good last season. So maybe you take the wrong center, and now you have better fit, but not a playable NBA guy, and you're kind of screwed regardless. Okay, that's worth taking into account here. But, a pretty decent what if would be, what if they just take Misi and let Dalton continue to slide? And the result in taking Dalton is like now he's an okay asset for the Lakers. There are still people around the league. He does have his a decent number of believers throughout the NBA. Dalton does, but his value has diminished compared to last year, and this time at last year. And so we'll, I guess kind of see what the Lakers were able to do with him. I would be pretty surprised if Dalton was on the team at the beginning of next season. Brandon Noeming writes, ideally, if LA can trade Maxey, Gabe, Dalton, and a first for Allen, split the full mid-level between Melton and Capella, who would you choose between Gafford, Claxton, and Allen? So I don't, I'd have to look at how much Jarrett Allen is making, but I don't think you get access to Jarrett Allen contract. Yeah, he's making like 30 mil. So I don't think you would. I just don't see any path outside of LeBron taking a big pay cut, or maybe the Lakers make such a crazy trade um financially that they open up their options there. But I don't see them having access to the full mid-level exception. Now, as far as and then as far as that trade goes, Maxey, Gabe, Dalton, and a first for Jarrett Allen. I would really prefer not moving that 2031 or 2032 first. I talked about this with Pete. You move that first, essentially, if you are convinced that the center you're getting back is definitely your pairing with Luka for a big chunk of his run in this organization. And maybe you feel that way about Allen, but I've now watched multiple postseasons here where Allen's team underachieves. And this year, the injuries need to be noted, but I don't know. I'd have to look at what Allen did in in this year's playoffs. I don't think he was very good. I'm going to look at, he was very good in the regular season, but in his last 5 games, when they lost to the Indiana Pacers in 5, he went for, in 30 minutes, scored scored 9 points, only grabbed 4 rebounds in game 1. That was a loss. Was a -3 in that loss. When they got blown out, that was game 5. So game 1, all right, so game 1, obviously a loss. 30 minutes, scored 12 points, only grabbed 5 rebounds, was a -9. Game 2, in another loss, he scored 22 points and grabbed 12 rebounds. That was a much closer game, and was only a -5 in that one. So like that's a pretty good game there for Allen. Blocked 3 shots in that game as well. In game 3, the game that they won, he scored 19 points, grabbed 12 rebounds, 4 of them offensive, blocked a couple of shots, and was a +38 in game 3. And then was a -24 in the next game. And then when they were eliminated, was a -3, scoring 2 and 9 points respectively in those 2 games. So it wasn't as bad as the prior offseason. He did have the one really good game 3 and a pretty good game 4. But yeah, I would be, or sorry, he had a good game 2 and a good game 3. Outside of that, he was pretty meh in the first game and then bad in games 4 and 5. So if you're basically saying to yourself, all right, here's my $30 million a year center. He was capable of playing 30 minutes plus for the Cavs. And maybe there is a bit of a fit issue there, between him and Mobley. But yeah, if you're trading for Allen and you're trading that first for Allen, you better be sure that he is your center for the future. And I just don't necessarily think he is. Desmond Smith writes, AR, Rui, and Dalton plus the 31 first-round pick for Herb and Murphy. Is that too much? Yeah, I think so. AR, Dalton, and the 31st pick, or the 2031 pick, that's a little steep. If you say AR, Rui, and Dalton without the pick, I'm listening. I'd be open. I would maybe ask for like a second rounder back, because you're talking about, you know, in terms of playable assets, those are your three most movable playable assets. Uh, I also don't really want to like this won't matter at all to the Lakers, but I don't really want to send Austin or Rui or Dalton, for that matter, or anybody I like, to New Orleans, because I think that is going to be such a ugly bog that in terms of basketball, that'll probably be one of the, maybe the worst basketball situation in the league next year. And I like Austin and Rui and Dalton too much to send them there. Again, that shouldn't matter at all to the Lakers, but I don't know, man. The Pelicans just have that touch of death on them right now, and I'm good. But uh I would probably say, AR, Rui, and Dalton without the first round pick, for Herb Jones and Troy Murphy. I mm, I would ask for a second rounder back, or a pick swap back, or something like that, and then pull the trigger, I would say. But that's getting closer. We're knocking on the door. John Howe writes, great show podcast. Thank you. Trade for Jalen D. Jalen, who am I? I'm blanking on who Jalen D would be. Jalen D. Oh, Duran? Oh, yeah, he's not being moved. Detroit loves him, and they had a really good season this year by their standards. But Jalen Duran, and then Bobby Portis, and then you sign Quentin Grimes, sign Clint Capella, for the veteran minimum, or the taxpayer mid level, then trade for Herb Jones and I think it's Jose Alvarado. But what do you think? AR-15 must go. There's a lot going on here. So one, again, I don't think Duran is being moved. I mean, look, this is something I meant to talk about earlier. And I mentioned this with Pete. I've mentioned this a few times with various, guests and co-stars and stuff. But the league is bracing for everybody being on the table, and any kind of outcome to this offseason being on the table. And if that's how everybody is operating, and we're sitting here saying, yeah, but are you sure about adding Rui? And are you sure about adding Austin? That doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't. It doesn't square with me. And again, I say this liking Austin. I say this liking Rui, but this idea of from the Lakers standpoint, given some of the talks that I've had, where it's like, yeah, they're open to doing stuff, and they're looking to be aggressive and all this, but they're thinking this, and but they don't want to do this. And it's like, if everybody else is getting ready and bracing for, this trade hurricane, then you better be prepping for it too. And essentially, like, I like Austin a lot. I think he's a really good player, and I think he's going to have a really good rest of his career, whether it's with the Lakers, and certainly if he goes to a situation where he's handed the keys. I think he's a really good dude, works his ass off. His story to this point has been really, really cool. But I am weary of and I'm like, by weary, I mean like the tired type. I'm a little tired of hearing about, yeah, but they really aren't going to move Austin. When teams are, we're talking about players who are better than Austin are going to be on the table. Now, maybe they have worse contracts. Maybe, it's a different situation, all the stuff. But there are players out there who are better than Austin who are going to be moved this summer. And if the Lakers are just sitting here, like, patting themselves on the back for finding Austin when really they didn't do anything, his agent approached them and said, "Hey, don't draft us. Nobody draft us. We want Austin to be a Laker." And kudos to Aaron for doing that, right? And finding that situation for Austin. Aaron Riley, that is, not Larsul, the one that you guys miss on the show and I miss on the show. But like you can't grow so infatuated and enamored by the few good decisions that you make over a few years on the margins that you turn those good decisions into bad ones because you're holding on so tightly to them. So um it's going to be really interesting because we have these finals coming up, and to wrap up the show I will go ahead and give my finals prediction. But we have these finals coming up. We have basically a couple weeks left of this NBA season. And in those couple of weeks, we're going to start to see teams, the Lakers were already having talks with other teams that they can have talks with. And we're going to see a better and a better and a better and a clearer and a clearer and a clearer picture of what that is actually going to look like when it comes time to more seriously hold these negotiations. But based on some of the stuff I'm hearing right now, I have gotten a little frustrated by, everybody else looking at the landscape across this NBA and saying, "Ooh, man, wow, anything can happen." And the Lakers are like, "Yeah, anything but this." With a couple of guys who, again, are good players, but haven't led to anywhere near the kind of winning that you would think they have based on the way that the Lakers are kind of talking about them. And that's got to change. Trying to see, as far as the other things there, Bobby Portis, man, the Lakers are good on like the power forward / center archetype of player. Quentin Grimes isn't going to be available. He's a restricted free agent to, I think, is it Philly? Wherever he is, they're going to re-sign him. Clint Capella might be had for the veteran minimum. Maybe you're probably closer to the mini taxpayer mid-level exception there. So, if you do that, I think you probably need another couple of centers beyond him. And then, Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado. Alvarado's a fun one. He's had some real injury concerns the last couple of years. Everybody in New Orleans has. But I could see where you're going there. Get somebody who really kind of nags people. Pete made this point though on his show, and he basically said how, like, or was it on my show? I forget. But he was talking about how he kind of sort of wants to just go into the season with Austin, if he's on the roster, as the smallest guy on the team. I like that idea. I don't want to see the Lakers play very much small ball next year. You guys have heard me talk about that in the past. I don't think the Lakers have the personnel to execute it now, and they don't have the assets necessary to go out and get guys who could more fully execute that kind of approach. But yeah, I would say, as far as the Lakers options, I like, if they're really adamant about bringing in a kind of more traditional point guard, and if they have to move Gabe, as expiring money, who can still play, then okay, Alvarado is a fine kind of substitute there. All right. I think that is let's see. Oh, we got one more. Did we get another one? We did. AR-15 is good, but his defense sucks. He can't guard. This is from John Howe again. He can't guard a parked RTA bus. He won't sign his extension. He'll go to free agency and get paid. Trade him. Quentin Grimes is right there. So the free agency bit of this is a real factor. We've talked about this on the show before. And, Trevor and I talked about this, and we are nervous about having a, bona fide elite trade asset become somebody that you could lose for nothing after he turns down the extension. That's concerning. Absolutely fair to bring that up. And I honestly think that's probably the best reason to move Austin. But the problem is any team that you move him to is also going to be wary of that situation. And that kind of lowers his price potentially. So you have that. The defense, I think the defense is a little overblown in that I think there are things that the Lakers should have been doing tactically, strategically. They weren't doing them. And that led to Austin being, put in these impossible spots. So I would probably say, as far as athletic limitations, he obviously has them. But I don't think he's as bad as you're talking about here, where he can't guard a parked bus. I would say he's a fine defender. Wouldn't quite get to good. And maybe you need, again, talking about fit, maybe you need a good defender next to Luka, in that lineup, and next to LeBron in that lineup. But yeah, I think he's a fine defender, but the contract stuff is absolutely fair to be concerned about. Absolutely fair. All right. That, I think, is going to do it here for me today. Tons of great questions here. I think what I might start doing is answering some of these questions off to the side, whether that be in the Discord or whether that be in writing. Just so that we're getting full use out of these mailbags. Yeah, I really fun episode though today. Thank you everybody for tuning in. I didn't get around to narrating the piece that I wrote on Friday, so that will go ahead and be narrated tonight for the lowdown. So that'll run tomorrow morning, and that's an RSS feed exclusive. So if you want to find that, you're gonna have to subscribe to the pod via whatever pods, wherever you get your pods, preferably on Odyssey. But until then, and until the next time you guys hear from me, have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's, and I will talk to you in a little bit. Bye, everyone.